Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 19 of my Learn to Program series. In this part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to work with SQLite databases inside of Python. And a database just makes it easy for you to organize your data for storage, as well as provides for very fast searching of that data. And I'm going to focus really in on how to work with SQLite databases in this tutorial, specifically on the Python end. But if you want to really get good at working with them, what you should do after you watch this video is watch my SQLite tutorial, because there's no point in me going and reviewing things that I've already created. So that tutorial is going to be ready for you as soon as you're done watching this one, and then you'll know just about everything about SQLite. So I have a link to that tutorial in the description underneath the video, so definitely check it out. And I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you basically, well, let's go and first cover our imports. If we want to work with SQLite inside of Python, you have to import the SQLite 3 module. And I think I might need a couple other different things here. I think I may use the sys module, I may not, and I'm also going to maybe use the CSV. Nah, I'm not going to use that one. Alright, so just those two modules, that's all we're going to need. Now, if you want to connect or create a SQLite database, you're going to do it in the same way. You're going to just call SQLite 3, followed by connect, and then testDB, or whatever you want the database to be called. And if testDB isn't already created, it will create it for you. Otherwise, it will just connect to it. And if you're wondering where this is going to show up, it's going to show up wherever you have this file stored. So I'm using python.py. The directory where that is where you will have your SQLite database show up. And we can come in here and we can say database created. And then after that, we can close the database. You always want to close your connection, and you do that by just calling close. And then here we could say something like database closed. Alright, if we run that, you're going to see database created and database closed. And if you go and look in the directory where you have everything saved, you're going to see testDB is right there. So, exactly like I said. Now, if that was all you could do with a database, that'd be pretty boring. So, let's go and create some other things. Now, a cursor is going to be used to traverse the records of your results. You're going to issue queries, or you're going to say, basically what a query is just a request for information, and a cursor is going to allow you to traverse through all of the information that is returned. And to create that, you just come in and reference your database connection and then call the cursor function after that. And then what we want to do is we want to create a table. So to create a table, you just go db connect once again, and then you're going to call execute, and executes a SQL command, and we're going to organize our data in tables by defining their name as well as the data type for the data. So let's go in here and let's just create that. Quite simply, what you're going to do inside of here is you're going to say create, and it's very common to have the SQL specific commands be in uppercase. So we're going to say we want to create a table, and it is going to be called employees. So pretty simple. It is going to have inside of it a unique identification number, and then I said we have to also define the data type, so we're going to have that be integer. And I'm going to mark this as a primary key. And a primary key is just a unique value that's going to differentiate each row of data inside of our table, because we need unique things inside of here. And it's going to be a number that is going to increment every single time a new employee is created. So we're going to mark that as auto increment. What that means is it's going to start off at 1. Whenever you create the next one, it's going to automatically increment that to 2, and so forth and so on. And I'm also going to say that it can not be marked with the value of null. Null meaning that there's no value, or that the value is null. So we definitely want each of the employees that we create to all have unique identification numbers, and they must have those numbers. And inside of it, I'm going to say that we also want to have a first name stored, and that's going to be text. And basically there are 5 different types of data types. There's null, which is what I talked about before. There's integer, which is going to be a numeric value without decimals. Text is going to be a string of variable length. Real is going to be a float or a number with decimal places. And then blob is used to store binary data. Don't worry too much about blob right now. I cover that in more detail in the SQLite database. All right, so we're saying that that can't be null. And then we're going to come in and have the last name also be defined, and that's going to be text and not null. And we're also going to store age inside of it. It's going to be an integer, and let's have that be not null. We're going to have an address inside of it, have that be text. Salary is going to be a real value, and you could also store a date inside here. So let's say we wanted to have it be the hire date, and we can put those in a couple different places. I'm going to put them in just simply as text, and then you close off your command right like that. And now after we have set that that's what we want to execute, we then call db connection, and we're going to call commit, which is going to have that be executed. And then we can have something like print and table created. And of course, another thing we can do and probably should do is come in here and say something like try and handle any exceptions that might have occurred. So let's tab that in as well. And then if we want to catch our exceptions, that's normally going to be SQLite 3 dot operational error. And then here, just to keep everything simple, we're going to say table couldn't be created. Another thing that's also kind of useful to know is how to delete a table if it exists. So let's say you wanted to delete this table and then recreate it. How you would do that is go db connect and then call execute, and then you could call drop table, just like delete, drop table if exists, and then we'll type in employees. And then of course we would also come in and do a db connect and a commit on that guy, and we can run it, and you can see here database created, table created, database closed. Okay, so we know that all that went through. Okay, so we know how to create tables and how to delete them. So now what we're going to do is cover how to insert data into a table. So let's just come after here, but before we close our database, and to do that, just again db connection once again. You could also use the cursor as well to execute these commands, and in some situations you have to, but I'm just going to continue doing it this way. So all we do is we say insert into whatever the table name is, and then we define the data that we're going to be entering in. And you notice here I do not have ID here, and the reason why is it's auto increment, so I don't have to put it in there. It's going to automatically create it for me and auto increment it. So you're going to list all the different things you're going to want to put inside of this database, and there's hire date, and that is going to be everything that we have here so far. And then I'm going to close off the parentheses there, and then what you do is you follow that up with values, and all of the values you want to insert into those specific pieces of data. So Derek and Linus, and also note I'm using different quotes inside here, double quotes on the outside, single quotes on the inside. That's perfectly fine. 41 age, and we can go and throw a address inside of there. And since I can give myself any amount of money I could possibly ever want, I'm going to give myself $500,000 salary. That would be pretty nice. And that's an integer, but make sure we take that out of there so that we don't cause any problems. And then finally, I want to put the date in the employee was hired, and there's a nice easy way to do that. You can just type in date and then now inside of there like that. And just like that, we are able to insert an employee into our database. So pretty easy stuff. We're then going to call the database connection, and we're going to call commit to execute it. And then I'd like to print out this information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function, and let's call it printdb. And I'm going to use that to print out all the information in my database. So I'm going to scroll up here, and I'm going to create this guy right here. So let's say I want to call define and print db or database, and inside of it let's go and retrieve the data from the table, and we're going to use a command called select to do that. I'm going to put it inside of a try block here though, just to be protective. So I'm going to say result is equal to, and here I'm actually going to use the cursor just to show you that you can use either of these, and we'll go select and the specific information I want back, which is going to be the ID. Let's make sure it's the same though. It's up. See, I have uppercase ID right there, so let's put uppercase ID right there. Then we get the first name, the last name, the age, the address. And there's tons of different commands you can use with select to get specific information, but like I said, watch the SQLite database after the database tutorial after this, and then you'll know everything there is to know about SQLite, and there you go. Alright, so that's how we're going to get all that specific information from inside of our database. That's going to give us all of our results. And then after we do that, we can cycle through those results. So we'll go row in result and then print out this information. And how we can get it is just by going row to get the first piece of information. Then we're going to do this for a whole bunch of these other guys. Go F name and L name, age, address, salary, and hire date. And then we'll just increment these because they're just a list. So there we go. And then we'll catch any exceptions that we might have had here. So except, and we could say SQLite 3, operational error. And we could do print something like the table doesn't exist or whatever. And of course, we can catch any other errors that could potentially be issued. And we could say couldn't retrieve data from database. And in these situations, very often you would use a finally, which would close the database, but I don't want to do that because that's going to mess up my tutorial that I have here. And now that I have all of that all set up, we can run it. And once again, we're going to insert this information into the database, and then we are going to call for that information to print. Run it, and there you can see it did. See, it printed out all of the information that I have stored inside of my database. So pretty cool stuff. You're also going to be able to come in here and update information in our database and use the update command for that. And very often you're going to use something that's unique, like the ID is unique. So we can say try, call your database connection, and execute. And like I said, you're going to use update from, and then it's going to be whatever the table's name is. And then you're going to use a unique ID. So you're going to say something like where ID is equal to 1. We only have one thing in there, so that's pretty much what we have to use. And then we're going to come in and database connection again and commit and paste in that exception right there. And table couldn't be updated. And otherwise, we're going to print out the new information and run it. And whoops, I forgot to actually update something. So let's go update employees. Whoops, I don't know what I was thinking there. And here is where you're going to call set, and then address is equal to, and we're going to update the address. We're going to say that I moved across the street. So let's just change this to street, and everything else is exactly the way that it should be. So let's run it. Sorry about that little error. And now you can see the address has been updated right there. Okay, so I know how to input information, create tables and all this other stuff, and update tables. Now, of course, we're probably going to also want to come in here and delete individual rows or individual table parts. And how we do that, let's go and use a try block again. And we're going to go database connection. And this would work much better, by the way, if all of these individual pieces were inside of separate functions. So we're going to say execute. And if you want to delete something, you type in delete from the specific database you want to delete from. And then you're going to type in some unique reason why that information is deleted. Well, we only have one customer or one employee inside of here, so we're going to say ID is equal to 1. And database connection once again, and commit. And that is going to execute that for us. Guess what? We're going to use this once again and paste that inside of there and run it. And here, that guy is going to be deleted, which you'll see here in a moment. Okay, so that's how we delete individual employees. We could also, let's say that we made a mistake and we decided we didn't want that to go through. We can say that we want our last command to be rolled back so that it never occurred. You just call rollback on it. And there you go. Now that's just as if we did not delete that whenever we call that. You're also going to be able to add new columns or pieces of data you want to add to a table. And how you do that, let's go try again. And we go database connection and execute and alter table, and we can say employees, the guy that we want to work with, and add column. And let's say we wanted to put a picture of the employee inside of there. We could say image and blob and give it a default value of null, and db connect commit is, so now our tables are also going to have a piece of data inside of them called image, and they're going to have a default value of null, and it's going to be a blob. And we could throw this inside of there. Table couldn't be updated. Seems pretty good to me, so just leave it that way. We're also going to be able to retrieve our database table names, and to do that you have to use the cursor, and we'll say execute, and then inside of this we'll say pragma table info, and then inside of here you're going to put in the specific table you want to return information on. Then after that we're going to be able to fetch all of those different results. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this row names is equal to, and we're going to use a function called fetchall, which is going to return all of the rows of data that we're looking for. Call this name tuple so we can display it a little bit better. And we'll say for name tuple in, call the cursor, and then fetch all, and then we can come in here and print out all of our row names, run it, and there you can see printed out all of the different row names, ID, F name, L name, da 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 da. And you can also see images there. So remember we changed our tables so that we had image inside of there. It's also there. A couple other random things we can do. Let's say that we wanted to get the total number of rows stored inside of our database. We could do that. Execute, select, and you use the command count to get that guy from employees. See, SQL is pretty easy to figure out. Just a little bit of practice, you'll get pretty good at it. I mean, it makes total sense. Basically, it's saying select from the table of employees the total count of employees. All right, so pretty simple stuff. And let's call this num of rows is going to be equal to the cursor. And then once again, we're going to use fetch all to get all of those results. And then to print out that information, we could say something like total rows, and then follow that up with num of rows, and we're going to go 0, 0 with that guy and run it. And total rows is going to be equal to 0. Why is that? Well, it's because we went in there and we deleted our only item inside of there. Whenever we come up here and say delete from employees where ID is equal to 1, so that's the reason why that comes back at 0. Create a whole bunch of employees and test that out. Another thing we can do, which is sometimes useful, is get the SQLite version that we're working with. And to do that, we can say execute, and we say select SQLite version, and that's going to be a function. And then to get that guy and print it out, let's go SQLite version, and then we're going to call cursor again, and here we're going to call fetch1 because there's only going to be one result. So that's one of the situations in which you use fetch1 instead of fetch all. And you can see there is the SQLite version we're working with. Another thing that is sometimes useful is to use what is called a dictionary cursor to retrieve data in a dictionary. And to do that, we're going to say with our database connection. Then you're going to call database connection, and row factory is going to be equal to SQLite 3 row. We're going to recreate our cursor to cycle through the results of this, and database connection once again, and call for a new cursor. And then what we're going to do inside of this is select everything from all of the employee tables, and just like this, execute. And how you do that is you go select everything from employees, create a new variable called rows, and let's get all of our results from that. So fetch all. And now what we're going to be able to do is cycle through this. So we'll say for row in rows, and then print out all of those results. So we're going to use format here, and specifically let's say that I just want to get the first and last name and then format them on the screen. So we're going to say row, and then inside of brackets we're going to put first name, and then we're also going to do the same thing for the next one, row, that, and last name. And let's go in here where we were deleting things so that we actually have some information. So this guy right here, we're going to come in here and comment out that block. Let's get this, get rid of that. Let's get rid of the rollback too and run it. And you can see that it went and printed the only piece of information out, which is Derek Banis. If you added more in there, you would have gotten more results though, of course. And then the final thing I'm going to show you how to do is how to write data to a file. And this is very useful if you want to back up your database data. So you can say with open, and we're going to store all of this into a file called dump SQL. I'll show you here in a second. We're going to write information to that. Get rid of that extra quote. And then we'll say as f and put that extra quote in there like that. And now what we're going to do is go for line in connect, and we're going to call a function called iterator dump. And this is going to return an iterator to dump the database into SQL format, which you'll see here in a moment. And then to write to it, write to the file, we'll go fwrite. And this is going to be a string and new line. And the line we're going to be writing inside of there. And if we run it, whoops, got a little bit of an error. Going to throw S in there for the string. Sorry about that. Run it again. And now if we go and look in our directory, you can see it right here. So where is it? Dump SQL. And if we open that, you're going to see right here is everything we would need to do to recreate our database and repopulate our database. So there you go, guys. That is a rundown of how we can use SQLite 3 with Python. And now you should go over and watch the SQLite tutorial, and then you'll know everything about SQLite and using SQLite with Python. And like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.